want to get in here and remind you guys of a couple things and maybe some new things you've never heard of that you are doing, I am doing, we are all doing and all guilty of in our gardens that are actually hurting it. So let's hear from our affiliates and then get right into the video. Hey guys, I just want to jump in here real quick before we get too far into this video. I want to let you guys know that I am officially an affiliate for AC Infinity, a place where you can get all of your grow setup needs, from ventilation, dehumidifiers, lights, grow tents, you name it, you can probably find it on acinfinity.com. So if you go to acinfinity.com, next time you need to get a different grow light or the next grow setup is calling your name, or you just need some replacement parts or maybe a refillable carbon filter, go ahead and check out acinfinity.com and use promo code EXPRESS420 at checkout. That is acinfinity.com. Use promo code EXPRESS420 for 10% off at checkout. Thank you guys very much. So I get a lot of people who are new to my channel, who are new to gardening in general, because this plant that we all know and love is not only becoming more legal in more states, but is also sparking passion in gardening in general. So I get a lot of traffic from people who are gardening other plants as well as medicinal varieties. So I want to get in here and just kind of brush up on a general broad topic. What are some things that you guys are doing that are actually hurting your garden that you think are actually helping? So with thing number one, man, stop visiting your garden so much. I know it's extremely tempting to go in there and look at your plants. They're beautiful, they're amazing. I'm sure they're fantastically healthy, and you want to see those plants as much as you can, to stay vigilant, to look at the plants, to understand what's going on at different times of the day and how they're acting. And maybe you need to check on them twice a day because you have small little delicate seedlings, or a plant that's in a pot that's too small, that you actually do need to check on more than once a day because you don't have an auto watering system set up. Well, here's the problem with that. The more times you go into your garden during the day, the more you're actually going to be introducing outside factors that are in turn going to harm your garden. If you're going from outside to inside, you could be collecting seeds of something you don't want. You could be collecting mold, pollen, dust, pests, eggs, something of the sort. You do not want to bring in any more contaminants than you can handle. And the best way to avoid this is either to go in fresh in the morning, after a shower, whatever, get into your garden, make sure you have clean clothes on, or just go in no clothes at all, freshly clean, nothing contaminating your garden. Go in one time a day, do every single thing you need to do, catalog, water, check for pests, check for mold, do your training all at once so you don't have to look at your garden for the rest of the day. You know they're good for today, possibly even tomorrow. You don't need to check on your plants every single day. You do not need to check on your plants multiple times a day. And if you do, if you can come up with an excuse to get into your garden, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, it is a horrible excuse to visit your garden again. And it is something you need to resolve within your garden so that you don't need to do that, i.e. transplanting, i.e. young seedlings, something like that. Obviously, there are some exceptions, but in general, if you can limit it to most once a day, that is optimal. And if you do feel the need to be looking at your garden 24/7, install a nanny cam. If you feel the need to be looking at your garden, you want to check in on it multiple times a day, you want to see it, you want to look at it, you want to watch it grow, get a nanny cam, get something of the sort, a security camera, I don't care. Just get something that can look at your plants, that's always in the garden, that isn't taking up more pests into your garden. The second thing that you guys are doing that you think is helping, that is actually damaging your plants, is over watering. And what is really over watering when you come to this medicinal plant and many plants across the board. It is the method in which you water. It comes down to the strategy in which each individual waters. Now, this comes with timing and not amount. And what I mean by this is, theoretically, if you have a plant in a solo cup, if you have proper drainage in the grow medium and you have proper drainage in the grow pot, say it's a solo cup with holes cut in the bottom, you could put a gallon of water through that plant if you felt the need to. If you're doing a flush, something like that, you want to put a huge amount of water through that medium, you can theoretically do that and you wouldn't have very many long-term effects. It's possible that the medium could be oversaturated, cutting off oxygen flow temporarily, but the real problem is when you don't know when to stop watering. If you're watering when your plant is soaked, but it's the next day or whatever, and your pot is absolutely soaked and heaping wet and sopping and dripping, or even if it's just super heavy, if you feel the soil and it's wet, you don't need to water. A lot of people fall into the overwatering trap, thinking they're giving their plants more love, which equals more plant. But all you're doing in this case is choking your plant out by giving it too much water, not letting it get enough oxygen. And even if your plant doesn't die from being overwatered, it could very well attract pests like fungus gnats. So in general, it is a good idea to keep your soil, your grow medium, a little bit drier than you feel like it should be. And obviously there's an exception when it comes to organic and hydroponics, obviously. But when it comes to growing in peat moss like I do, what I'm most familiar with, you're going to want to wait until that pot is about a quarter of the actual weight from full saturation. This will ensure that your plant is getting a proper dryback period. It is sending its roots to find more water. You're expanding the root system and expanding its feeding capabilities. This is going to be an optimal way to do it. And then that drills right into the next thing, which is underwatering. You want to make sure that plant gets oxygen. You don't want to water as often. But if you wait too long, your plants are going to start drooping. If your plants do start drooping and they're not reaching towards the light like they should be when they are properly watered, your plants are underwatered. And this can obviously lead to a lot of things where you're going to be attracting pests again. It's going to be weak against mold and other contaminants. It's just going to be a weak plant that doesn't have a strong immune system and isn't what it could be. And it makes it very susceptible to a lot of life-threatening issues. You're going to want to make sure that your plant is nearly constantly praying towards the light, trying to get more light, reaching up towards it. You want to make sure your roots are ever expanding so it can get better root systems, a stronger, denser root system inside that pot. And if you can get the watering down, you will most likely have a healthy plant, assuming your feeding regimen is on point. Which leads us into another thing people do wrong, which is overfeeding. If you are overfeeding your plant, it means you are giving it too much nitrogen or nutrients mixed into the water. And this is normally going to be towards the mineral base, so hydroponics, peat moss, people who are using synthetic mineral-based nutrients that manually have to mix in the nutrients to the water. Organic guys, you should be good if you have a good ratio of organic material that those microbes can feed on to then give to the plant. You should be pretty all right. But speaking to the guys who are mixing their nutrients, you do not want to go too far off the feeding regimen if you have specific nutrients for these plants. And the reason being is because the companies who are making these targeted towards us is that they want to make the perfect, theoretically perfect nutrient for our plant. There's obviously different variables when it comes to specific phenos, specific cultivars that are going to change the way you need to feed. But if you have a general rule of thumb to go off of, such as a feeding chart, start with that and then grow accordingly. It is a general baseline that you can go off of to then get healthy plants. And if your plant is showing deficiencies, increase the dosage of whatever it's showing deficiencies in. If it's showing toxicities, obviously bring that back. But you want to start with the regimen. You want to start with what the manufacturer is suggesting. And speaking of nutrients, Seedsman has released a line of their own nutrients, so you can use that link to go pick those up as well. And I'm sure they got a decent feed chart to follow. I have not used their nutrients personally, disclaimer, but I'm sure that it's pretty decent if it's coming from Seedsman. One thing we haven't touched on yet that a lot of people don't understand is adjusting factors of your growth. And this is going to incorporate light, it's going to incorporate your pots, it's going to incorporate your conditions in general. So I want to touch on a couple things when it comes to changing the factors of which you are doing to then solve a problem. If you're facing a problem in your garden, there can be a million solutions. You can ask 9 gardeners and get 13 different answers as to what your problem could be in your garden and how to solve it. The best thing to do when you are solving a problem in the garden is to examine the problem, digest the problem, take apart the problem, and come up with a couple things you could do in a couple day windows to change the problem and change one factor at a time. That's going to be extremely important, because if you go through and you change every single factor that it could be and it solves the problem, you don't know which factor is actually responsible for the problem at the source, and everything else could have been good. The other things you changed could have been fine, and then you changed this one thing and it made everything okay again. Now, is that necessarily the worst thing in the world? No, but you don't learn exact things by doing a ton of different things. You have to narrow it down, try one thing at a time, give it a couple days. If it doesn't solve the problem, move on to the next thing it possibly could be until the problem is solved, and that is going to get you where you need to be. Now, what are specific problems you could be facing? Well, you could be facing stretching, which means you could have to crank up your light a little bit, or it could mean you have leggy genetics, and it's very hard to tell which it is, especially super early on. But if you have a giant light and it's beaming down on those plants and they're not burning but they're still leggy, it's very possible you just have leggy seedlings. So you can adjust your light, you can raise it, you can lower it, you can dim it, you can brighten it, and a couple of those things are going to be things you need to do in your garden at different times. Another big thing, and I think this is going to be the thing we leave off of, is transplanting too early or too late. Now, transplanting early doesn't seem like the biggest issue, but the biggest issue when it comes to transplanting early is that you're going to be taking that plant out of a pot where its roots have not had time to actually grow into the form of the pot. It has not had time to expand its roots to hold that pot together. Now, this is going to be really important when you look at a couple things. One, it's going to be messy because the roots aren't holding all that soil together. And two, the roots aren't holding all that soil together and the roots aren't strong enough to handle being transplanted from that pot. Now, you could have clumps of roots fall off and prune your roots. This can cause excess transplant trauma that already is giving your plant stress, already is giving your plant a hard time. So I would definitely wait until you're watering every other day or every single day. But if you're getting to the point where you need to water every single day, you better transplant it on the 3rd day. Transplanting too late. This can be a ginormous issue when it comes to wanting to throw the momentum of your plant forward, making sure it has the best, most consistent growth rate you possibly can, because if you overgrow your plant in the pot, it is not going to have enough access to enough water to hold enough nutrients to feed the entire plant. It is going to be uptaking nutrients at a faster rate, uptaking resources and using resources at a faster rate than you are able to supply them. So make it easier and just up pot when you're in doubt. And when you're going into flower, I found that increasing your pot size by about 3 to 5 gallons is normally where you want to be. For example, if you have a 5-gallon pot that your plant was vegging in, maybe put it in a 7, maybe put it in a 10. If you have a plant that is ginormous, it's in a 10-gallon pot, definitely at least throw it into a 15. This is going to make sure that your plant has enough root space during the flower stage where you're not doing any transplanting to actually not only fill out the entire root system, but not become overbearing to the pot. I hope these tips helped. If they did, definitely leave a like on your way out. If you are new here and you want to see more videos from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified every time I upload. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. Anything I missed. And
I will see you next time. Thank you very much.